Hello and welcome. Today we're discussing strategic relocation within the lower 48 of the United States. What I mean by strategic relocation is where would be a good place to locate you and your family before an SHTF situation? Where's a safe place to call home within the lower 48 United States, taking into consideration a whole bunch of factors. So, as those factors exclude a place on this map, I will scratch off those areas on the map, and by the end of the video, we'll see what we're left with. All right, stick around. This should be a good one. Let's start with population density. Here we see a map from the United States Census Bureau, which shows the areas of the lower 48 that are most densely populated. Now, maybe to you, people aren't a problem, but to me, in an SHTF situation, people are going to be the main problem. And even if you don't see high population areas as an issue, you should also take into consideration that high population areas make high density targets for nuclear weapons or attack, something along those lines. So now let's revisit our original map. I've marked out in red the highest population areas. We got the Great Lakes Rust Belt area, pretty much the entire East Coast, Florida, parts of Texas, and pretty much the entire West Coast. And also Denver, Colorado, because, nobody wants to go there. Now, this map shows us high crime rates per 100,000 population. So, population density and high rates of crime don't always go hand in hand. Now, of course, the higher the population, the more total incidence of crime you might have, but we definitely see along the lower Mississippi a high crime rate, and that's per 100,000 people. So lower Mississippi Delta and lower Mississippi River from Illinois on down, you're out. So now let's go back to our very high-tech map, and you'll start to see more and more of the country being marked in red as we go along here. If you notice, certain parts of Appalachia, you got West Virginia, Western Virginia, parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, not affected so far. However, you should take this into consideration, that these areas are the places that all those people on the East Coast think they're going to bug out to. This is where all the New Yorkers, all the people from Atlanta think they're going to run to when they head for the hills. So let's go back to our map. Now we see a lot more red in the lower 48. These are your high population areas, your high crime areas, and the places where the people from those high populated areas think they're going to run to when they head for the hills and bug out when SHTFs. So avoid the red. So we're starting to notice something here up here in North Dakota, South Dakota, parts of Wyoming, Montana. They're looking pretty good so far. But let's go ahead and pull up a map of where nuclear missile silos are located within the United States, because those are going to be the primary target in the event of nuclear war. So here we see that there are a lot of nuclear missile silos located in the western part of North Dakota, western Montana, and that southeastern Wyoming, northeastern Colorado area. Now, perhaps nuclear war isn't something that you're taking into consideration. You're not worried about it. You don't think it's likely to happen. That's fine. But think about this. At the end of the Cold War, all the missiles within these silos were not targeted at anything. They're not aimed anywhere. But all those old Soviet missiles have to be targeted somewhere, so they're still aimed where they were aimed in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And these targets are target number one in the event of a nuclear war. So going back to our map, I've marked in blue where those nuclear silos are located, and because the wind usually blows from the west to the east, where the fallout from those massive nuclear attacks would go to. So you don't want to live anywhere downwind of these things, that's for sure. So South Dakota is still looking okay. I know the eastern part of South Dakota has a lot of agriculture, a lot of cornfields, stuff like that, but the western part is very, very dry. Not a whole lot of water available, and that's what we're going to talk about next, is the availability of water. Very important to survival. This map shows deserts and dry areas in the lower 48. Now, obviously, you've got your West Texas, your Arizona deserts, Nevada, But those Great Plains, you think of western Kansas, western Nebraska, western South Dakota, those areas can be very dry. And you're going to need water not just for drinking, but to raise crops, raise a garden, water your animals, and so on. So here we go back to our map, and I've used the color green, ironically enough, to mark the areas of the country where there isn't going to be a whole lot of green. I could have marked a little more Southern California green there too. Now, obviously, these are just generalizations, but so far, there isn't much left on the map. And we've really only taken into consideration population density, high crime rates, where all those people are going to flee to, how far can they get on a tank of gas? We've also looked at some of your low population, but still nuclear target areas and the very dry areas. So let's take a few more factors into consideration. So right in the center of our map here, we kind of notice the Ozarks area. We got southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, a little bit of eastern Oklahoma and Kansas. Now, you should consider that in eastern Oklahoma, you've got Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that's one of the most violent cities in the U.S., so that'll be out. Northwestern Arkansas has the Fayetteville area. That is one of the fastest areas of the country as far as growth goes, due to a lot of military technology and laboratory jobs. I don't think I want to be near any of those laboratories. So let's go ahead and update it for the Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Kansas City, Missouri, and the Fayetteville area. Those areas are out. And that's due to high population, high crime, places you don't want to be. This map indicates all the nuclear power plants in the U.S. Notice that Kansas City, where I just scratched out, and the Fayetteville, Arkansas area, there are nuclear power plants. So do you want to live there? Do you want to live near there if there's an incident? Well, you can't help but notice most of these are located in the east of the lower 48 United States. There are a few out on the west coast, but typically there aren't too many in the Rocky Mountain region. So let's step away from negative factors just for a second and focus on a positive factor. This map shows where all the good farmland in the country is. You notice that lower Mississippi area along the Mississippi River, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, up into the Dakotas. There's also a patch out there in eastern Washington state that looks good. But here's where all the good farmland is located. Now, there's farms everywhere, but this map just shows where the best soil is and rainfall. So going back to our original map, you can see that this by no means is a scientific way of doing things, but a few areas are sticking out. Area number one, to me, that northern Idaho, eastern Washington area. On the good farmland map, eastern Washington had some good farmland. Northern Idaho doesn't have any tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes. All the nuclear silos are located to the east of there, so the radiation and the fallout is not going to really affect you. From Seattle, Washington, you might get a little bit of fallout, but there's some mountains there that'll help with that. Southern Idaho could be interesting. Now, a lot of farmland down there, but it's heavily irrigated. It's a dry area. And without all the pumps and the electricity and, the rules and regulations, I don't know. That's a highly contested, who gets what water down there. They're already fighting over it. You could imagine if there were no law and order, how the fighting over water in that area would be. You've got western Wyoming and northern Utah. Now, northern Utah is a rapidly growing area. You got that Salt Lake area. You do got some crime. You do have a high population density, but it doesn't extend too far away from the city. It's kind of isolated there in the city. That Wyoming area, very cold in the winter. Not a lot of good farmland. It might be kind of tough to make a go of it there. Eastern South Dakota, very good farmland. Your population centers are going to be Sioux Falls, down in the southern eastern corner of the state. South of there, you've got Omaha, Nebraska. You go too much far to the east, you're going to run into the Minneapolis area. So you would have to be very careful population density wise where you located yourself within the eastern South Dakota, western Minnesota area, maybe even a little bit of that northeastern Nebraska area. As long as you stay away from Omaha, wouldn't be too bad. So you'll also notice maybe the Ozark area is still left pretty much unscathed on the map here. It's not a bad area, not a bad area at all. There are some tornadoes, poisonous snakes. There are some high crime areas, especially when you get into the Springfield, Missouri, kind of Tulsa, Oklahoma area. Little Rock, Arkansas is a big time no-no. But that eastern Oregon, northern Idaho, maybe down into the Wyoming, be a good area for strategic relocation. Eastern South Dakota, yes, there's a little bit of fallout. If there were a nuclear attack, you would be at risk for fallout. But otherwise, a good area for strategic relocation. Excellent farmland, friendly people. It's a nice part of the country. As long as you're on the eastern part of the Missouri River, you got good fertile soil, plenty of rain. West of the Missouri River, it looks like Dances with Wolves out there. It's the high desert, a lot of grassland, pretty dry, but very low population, so maybe consider that as well. And my apologies to my southern friends, but yeah, nothing in the south. Nothing in the south looks good to me. You would think up north it would be cold and you would freeze to death, and oh my goodness, the polar bears and this and that. Well, as someone who grew up in northwestern Illinois with nothing but a wood stove and a very poorly insulated house, I'm here to tell you it's doable. It's not the most fun thing you'll ever do, going through a cold winter with nothing but a wood stove, but it's definitely doable. And yeah, between the hurricanes, the snakes, the the spiders and scorpions, the high crime, the multitude of nuclear power plants, high population density, just being in an area where people are going to go to if there is a bad situation, those factors make the southeastern part of the United States not ideal. Sure, it can be done. It can definitely be done. There's some beautiful parts down there. The southwestern United States, too dry. It's too dry there. Not enough water. If all those pumps go out and the dams and the reservoirs aren't maintained, you're out of luck. So, what did I miss? What factors should I have taken into consideration that I did not? Now, obviously, there are many, many factors one could consider, but that would be an even longer video. Maybe we'll revisit this topic another day. Anyway, do you agree with my conclusion about the areas that I think are good? Or do you disagree with some of the areas I think are bad? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget to give the video a like and hit that subscribe button. I'll see you all down the trail somewhere. Until then, have a great day.